In the frozen silence of the Ardennes, a fugitive CIA agent seeks refuge inside an abandoned stone church, only to uncover a secret sealed since 1983. Beneath its altar lies a hidden archive, guarded by a priest who vanished without a trace, and hunted by the very commander who betrayed his own country. As mercenaries close in and old ghosts rise, one truth becomes clear. Some witnesses were never meant to speak again. But tonight, the silence finally breaks, and the past will demand justice. A thin winter rain drifted over the forested hills of the Ardennes, turning the ancient cobblestone paths slick beneath the gray morning light. Fog clung to every pine tree like silent witnesses guarding secrets of long-dead wars. In the distance, the outline of a stone church emerged, an old Romanesque structure built from dark granite blocks, its bell tower leaning slightly, as though tired from carrying centuries of sorrow. This was Saint-Michel-du-Roche, a sanctuary forgotten by the world except for the stories whispered about it. And this bitter morning, a lone man moved toward its doors, the kind of man who was accustomed to running through storms far worse than rain. His name was Elias Ward, 35 years old, a CIA operative built in sharp lines and quiet edges. Elias had a tall, athletic frame shaped by years of field missions, short dark hair always perfectly trimmed, even in chaos, and gray eyes that seemed to measure every detail before allowing themselves to blink. His features were striking, yet faintly carved by exhaustion, the subtle shadows under his eyes making him appear like someone who had spent years bargaining with danger. Elias rarely showed emotion. Discipline was stitched into him too young, ever since he watched his father, a decorated Army intelligence officer, disappear without explanation when he was only 10. That childhood loss made him guarded, rational, and calm, even when storms threatened to swallow him whole. Now he was running, not from a foreign enemy, but from a failed mission that smelled too much like a setup. He had left the U.S. under unofficial orders, carrying nothing but a black suit, a silver tie tucked into his jacket pocket, and the instinct that someone wanted him erased. Elias pushed open the heavy wooden door. The church interior was dim, lit only by thin beams slicing through stained glass windows, depicting saints with fractured faces. Dust danced in the cold air, and the silence felt sacred, almost aware. According to old CIA files, this church once had a caretaker. Father Leonard Brooks, a gentle American-born priest of medium height with kind brown eyes and thinning blonde hair, known for his humility and his habit of offering shelter to anyone who arrived at the church steps. But Leonard had vanished in 1983, leaving behind only open questions. The Belgian locals remembered him as soft-spoken, compassionate, almost painfully honest. Nothing about him suggested the kind of man who would willingly disappear unless he had discovered something someone wanted buried. Elias walked deeper inside, boots echoing softly. A faint scent of old wine and damp stone led him to a side door descending beneath the church. The air grew colder as he followed the narrow steps. The cellar was spacious, lined with dusty wine racks and shelves sagging under jars of preserves long expired. It was the kind of room where shadows like to settle and stay. At a wooden table in the center lay a single item. Bible, open, untouched for years, yet strangely free of dust. Elias approached slowly. The bookmarked page was from the Book of Revelation. A sentence had been underlined in fading ink. The silence of the last witnesses. Elias frowned. Old intelligence rumors said Father Leonard had kept something in this cellar, something never meant to see daylight. The phrase underlined here wasn't a coincidence, not in a place like this. He reached out to touch the page when a distant memory tugged at him, a classified document mentioning the church as a Cold War waypoint for informants, a sanctuary for those carrying truth too dangerous to hold in public. A sanctuary much like the one Elias needed now. He closed the Bible carefully, studying the room with sharpened focus. Someone had left him a breadcrumb after 40 years. Far across the ocean in Langley, Virginia, a woman stared at a flickering monitor deep inside the CIA's Code Analysis Department. Marina Hale, 29, was a cryptanalyst with a reputation for intuition sharper than most agents' weapons. She was slender, with auburn hair usually tied in a loose knot, expressive green eyes, and freckles scattered across her fair skin, features that made her look gentle, though she possessed a mind capable of unweaving the most stubborn codes. Marina was empathetic, analytical, sometimes too bold for her own safety. Her personality had been shaped by the loss of her older brother, a Navy linguist, in a mission shrouded by classified silence. Ever since, she distrusted easy explanations, and she distrusted internal accusations even more. She had spent the last 6 hours reviewing encrypted logs related to Elias Ward. Every line she read told her the same story. Nothing about his failed mission made sense. Not the timeline. Not the communication blackout. Not the sudden blame dumped on him like a convenient trash bin. Marina leaned back, heart tightening with certainty. Elias had been set up, and someone didn't want anyone digging further. But Marina Hale never stopped at warnings. Her fingers hovered over her keyboard. She began tracing the data trail, following anomalies others would overlook. Though continents apart, both she and Elias were stepping onto the same forgotten path, one buried beneath stone, silence, and a warning written inside an abandoned Bible. Elias closed his eyes briefly, listening to the quiet pulse of the old cellar. Somewhere in this darkness lay the first truth he needed. Somewhere here began the reason Leonard Brooks vanished. And somewhere far away, Marina Hale had just decided she would not let him face the storm alone. The rain had eased by the time Elias Ward stepped back into the nave, though the sky outside still carried the gray heaviness of a storm not yet finished. Saint-Michel-du-Roche remained as silent as a sealed vault, its stone arches curving above him like the ribs of an ancient beast. Elias scanned the interior again. The Bible in the cellar wasn't enough. Father Leonard Brooks wouldn't leave a single cryptic message without scattering more pieces somewhere. And Elias knew one place caretakers often hid their most private things: the bell tower. The staircase to the tower was narrow, worn smooth by centuries of footsteps. Elias ascended slowly, fingers brushing cold stone. The air grew warmer as he climbed, a surprising change, as if the tower held its own breath. When he reached the top, the chamber opened into a circular room with a massive bronze bell hanging at its center. Dust layered everything except for a small wooden bench pushed against the wall. On it lay an old leather satchel. Elias approached, noticing the satchel was dry despite leaks in the roof. Someone had taken care to protect it from the elements. He opened it carefully. Inside was a yellowed envelope, edges brittle with age. No postage, no addressee. Just a name signed elegantly at the bottom of a folded sheet: Father Leonard Brooks. Elias unfolded the letter. Leonard's handwriting, slanted and elegant, traced across the page as though his hand had trembled while writing it. If you are reading this, then I have failed to protect the 13th archive. It is here, beneath the church, but deeper than the cellar. They will come for it. They will not allow the truth of Candlefall to surface. I pray whoever finds this has the courage I lacked. Elias felt a cold pulse in his chest. Candlefall again. A word he had only seen in restricted files. A word tied to his downfall. Leonard continued, I have hidden the key where only the silent will look. If they take me, let this serve as my last confession, not to God, but to justice. A faint ink blot stained the bottom margin, as though Leonard had been interrupted. Elias refolded the letter when he heard a sudden fluttering. A bird, a young kestrel, with rust-brown feathers streaked with gray and round amber eyes, had slipped into the tower. Its wings beat softly as it settled on the beam above. The kestrel looked no older than a year, small and alert, with a tiny scar on its left talon, likely from escaping a larger predator. Elias studied the creature a moment. Quick, watchful, a survivor. It reminded him of himself more than he liked to admit. The bird tilted its head, almost urging him to hurry. He slid the letter into his jacket and took the satchel as he descended from the tower. In the nave, the air felt heavier again. Something about the church had changed, as though it sensed its secrets were being stirred. Meanwhile, thousands of miles away, inside a secured wing of the CIA headquarters, in Langley, Marina Hale stepped into a dim archival room where the hum of servers echoed like whispers in the dark. She had waited until most analysts left for dinner. Marina wasn't rebellious, but she wasn't obedient either, not when her instincts screamed at her. She sat at a terminal and entered a restricted channel normally reserved for oversight committees. Her clearance barely allowed her to peek into its lowest levels, but Marina had always been gifted with systems. The machine flickered. Rows of operations classified from the 1970s and 1980s appeared. She scrolled carefully, pushing past warnings. Then she saw it. Operation Candlefall, with its entire file structure wiped clean. All except a metadata fragment showing it once involved transnational interceptions, clergy liaison assets, and a document code, ARC-13. Marina's pulse quickened. "Archive 13, she whispered. Her mind raced. ARC-13 correlated exactly with the phrase in Elias's sealed disciplinary report, a report she had read twice already, fully convinced it had been doctored. Before she could dig deeper, a shadow fell across the room. She turned sharply. The man who stepped inside was Director Raymond Castor, a senior figure in internal security, around 57, with a stern, hawk-like face and dark hair graying at the sides. His tall, lean frame held the stiffness of someone who had spent decades giving orders rather than taking them. Raymond was known for being controlled, suspicious of rogue intuitions, and unyielding when it came to protocol. His presence alone made analysts sit straighter. "Working late, Hale?" His tone was mild, almost soft, but something cold flickered behind his eyes. Marina swallowed, steadying her breath. "Just clearing backlog," she replied, her voice even. Raymond's gaze drifted toward her terminal, and for a moment she thought he saw the unauthorized query window still closing. But he simply nodded once. "Be careful what you choose to investigate. Not all files want to be found." And then he was gone. Marina waited until her pulse slowed before resuming her search. But not in the system. She had just learned something more valuable. Someone inside the agency knew Candlefall was resurfacing, and someone feared it. Back in Ardennes, Elias had returned to the cellar with the satchel. He lit an old lantern and examined the stonework again, pressing alongside the shelves until his fingers touched a seam, a faint line in the wall, too precise to be natural. Leonard's words echoed in his mind. "The key is where only the silent will look." Elias knelt. The Bible lay where he had left it, untouched. He pressed the edge of its spine against the seam. A soft click answered. The wall shifted. A draft of colder air seeped through. Elias exhaled slowly. The 13th archive was real, and now, for the first time in 40 years, it was opening. The stone wall groaned open with the slow reluctance of something that had not been disturbed in decades. Elias Ward lifted the lantern, its golden halo trembling as cold air spilled from the newly revealed passage. The darkness beyond felt ancient, older than the church itself, as if carved by hands that understood secrecy better than prayer. The narrow corridor sloped downward, cut into bedrock. Elias stepped inside, letting the wall close behind him with a muted thud. The lantern-illuminated shelves carved directly from the stone, each lined with dust-coated relics. Rolled maps tied in twine, Cold War radio parts, tin boxes, film canisters. At the far end stood a wooden desk, warped with age. On top of it sat a small reel-to-reel tape recorder, its metal reels tarnished but intact. Beside it lay a microfilm reader, its lens cracked yet still usable. A single label, faded but legible, was taped to the recorder. 1983, Last Testament. Elias set down the lantern and brushed a thin layer of dust from the machine. He turned the crank gently to test its gears. They resisted, then cooperated with a soft metallic sigh. He pressed play. After a few seconds of static, a voice filled the chamber, warm, steady, yet strained. It was unmistakably Father Leonard Brooks, the long-missing caretaker, his tone less like a priest delivering a sermon and more like a man confessing to the world. "If you hear this," Leonard began, "then I have failed to deliver my warning in time. I pray the archive survives my absence. I pray someone has the courage to follow its truth." Elias leaned closer. The tape crackled. "I was recruited not for my faith, but for my mobility. A priest draws no suspicion. During the Cold War, I carried messages for the agency across borders, notes hidden in hymnals, microfilm under my collar. But I discovered something darker. Someone within our own ranks sought to silence every witness connected to Candlefall. Every last one." A tremor in Leonard's breath echoed through the chamber. "I hid here, not because I feared death, but because the archive must outlive me. I hear footsteps above already. If they find me—" A sharp knock sounded on the tape. Leonard's voice rose in a whisper of desperation. "To whoever listens, the 13th Archive holds their crimes. Do not let them bury us twice." The tape ended abruptly, the reel spinning out into silent emptiness. Elias exhaled, a slow, controlled breath. Leonard Brooks had not vanished willingly. He had been hunted. Elias examined the rest of the room. The maps, when unrolled, depicted old smugglers' routes through the Ardennes, marked with red arrows and handwritten dates from the early 1980s. One tin box held microfilm strips, neatly labeled with coded phrases. Another larger box contained surveillance photos, grainy figures meeting at night, license plates, documents exchanged under dim streetlights. One photo caught Elias's attention. Standing among the shadows was a man with broad shoulders, square jaw, and dark eyes that filled the image with menace. He wore a heavy trench coat and held a cigar. Elias didn't know him, but the feeling was unmistakable. This was someone important, someone dangerous. Meanwhile, in Washington, D.C., Marina Hale moved through Dulles International Airport disguised in a conservative navy blue coat and black scarf. She kept her auburn hair tied tight, glasses perched on her nose. No one would guess she worked in cryptanalysis at the CIA. She looked more like a traveling academic. Earlier that day, she had been summoned by Assistant Director Calvin Rhodes, a tall, balding man in his mid-50s, whose normally mild demeanor had hardened. His gray eyes were tired, not from age, but from too many compromises. Rhodes was respected for his fairness and disliked for his honesty. Marina had admired him once, but the version of him who confronted her in his office felt colder. "Hale," he said, voice low, "stop digging into Candlefall. You're walking into something you don't understand." Marina had crossed her arms tightly across her chest. "Sir, Elias Ward is being set up. The logs were manipulated, the metadata altered, That's an order," Rhodes cut in sharply. But behind his stern tone, something flickered. Fear. Rhodes wasn't someone who frightened easily. Marina realized he wasn't warning her for the agency's sake. He was warning her because he knew exactly what Candlefall meant. Still, Marina boarded a plane the moment she left the building. She wasn't built to obey blindly. and something in Rhodes's eyes told her she was right to leave. On her connecting flight to Brussels, she sat beside a middle-aged woman named Carolyn Bristow, a retired schoolteacher traveling alone. Carolyn had warm brown skin, short silver curls, gentle hazel eyes, and a smile that seemed to appear even when she wasn't trying. Her floral dress contrasted with her practical hiking boots. She explained she had spent years saving up to finally visit European cathedrals she had read about in her youth. Marina, torn between tension and the need to appear normal, allowed the woman's calm energy to settle her nerves. Carolyn talked softly of her late husband, a kind man who had always wanted her to see the world after he passed. There was a sadness in her voice, but also resilience, the kind of resilience that ages gracefully. Marina found herself relaxing for the first time that day. Carolyn wasn't part of her mission, but the gentle presence of a stranger reminded her what she was fighting for. People who still believed truth mattered. Back beneath the church, Elias continued sorting through Leonard's archive. At the edge of the desk, he discovered a metal key, slender, iron-forged, with a faint engraving, Phi. The 13th archive had more than one layer, and Leonard had left instructions. Elias placed the key in his pocket just as the lantern flickered. A breeze whispered through the chamber. Someone had opened the door. Elias straightened slowly. Footsteps echoed in the corridor outside. The hunt that had consumed Leonard Brooks had finally returned. The footsteps grew heavier, echoing down the narrow stone corridor like the heartbeat of something ancient waking up. Elias Ward extinguished the lantern and pressed himself into the darkest corner of the archive chamber. His breath slowed, muscles locked in silent readiness. Whoever had entered the hidden passage moved with confidence, not the uncertainty of a curious villager or a wandering tourist. This was the stride of a man who already knew what waited in the shadows. The figure who stepped into the room was tall, thick-shouldered, and carried the authority of someone accustomed to forcing history into his shape. His hair was silvered at the temples, but thick, swept back with the careful vanity of someone who wished to appear timeless. His eyes were a cold steel blue, eyes that calculated value in everything, even people. This was Grant Mercer, age 62, former CIA operations commander, now leader of a private clandestine group known quietly as the Halberd Syndicate. Mercer was infamous for his iron charm, measured voice, and an emptiness in his expression that suggested remorse was something he had surgically removed long ago. A deep knife scar creased his right cheek, a remnant of a covert operation gone wrong in '87, one that old colleagues whispered had altered him permanently. Some said it turned him ruthless. Others said it merely revealed what he already was. Mercer's gloved hand trailed across the dusty shelf. 40 years, he murmured, and the priest still buys me time. Elias stayed still, silent. Mercer lifted the lantern Elias had left on the table and examined the reel-to-reel tape machine. His lip curled. "Leonard Brooks," he said, as if addressing an old friend turned useless. "Always too righteous for this world. You should have fled while you could." A second figure entered the chamber. Ryland Shaw, a mercenary in his late 30s with a gaunt face, patchy beard, and restless gray eyes that darted like a trapped animal's. His frame was lean but wiry, giving the impression of coiled aggression. Shaw had a reputation for brutality and an unhealthy enjoyment of violence, shaped by a childhood spent in a series of harsh juvenile facilities where empathy was treated like weakness. He moved with twitchy eagerness. "Sir, the perimeter's secured. No sign of Ward topside." "He's here," Mercer said with certainty, setting down the lantern. "Men like Ward are too stubborn to die early." He scanned the room. "Find him." Shaw nodded and disappeared into the corridor. Elias waited several seconds, then melted from the shadows like a phantom. He struck Mercer from behind, pinning him to the desk. Mercer gave a sharp laugh, even with Elias's forearm at his throat. "Elias Ward, I knew you'd sniff your way into this mess." Elias tightened his grip. "You killed Leonard Brooks." "He made choices," Mercer rasped. "Bad ones." "He protected Candlefall." "He protected nothing. He delayed the inevitable." Mercer's voice lowered into something dark. "You see, Ward, Candlefall was never meant to be a mission. It was a purge." Elias's grip loosened, barely a fraction, enough for Mercer to twist violently, throwing his weight into Elias and shoving him backward. The two men collided, sending dust into the air. Mercer lunged for a metal rod leaning against the shelf. Elias blocked the strike and landed a punch to Mercer's ribs. Mercer staggered, but smirked. "Still loyal to a country that will burn you the moment you ask why." Before Elias could respond, a gunshot split the air. A bullet shattered the stone inches from his head. Ryland Shaw had returned, pistol raised, eyes alight with anticipation. "Found him!" Elias dove behind the desk as Shaw fired again. The shot ricocheted off the wall. Shaw advanced with a predator's grin until a sudden shout echoed from the corridor. "Elias!" Marina Hale burst into the chamber, breathless from the climb. She wore a long beige trench coat over dark jeans, her auburn hair wind-tousled from the night air. Her green eyes widened as she took in the scene. Mercer, Shaw, and Elias locked in a deadly triangle. Shaw shifted his aim toward her. Marina's instincts were faster. She hurled the heavy microfilm reader at him. The machine smashed into Shaw's wrist, knocking the gun free. Elias sprang from cover, sweeping Shaw's legs. Shaw hit the ground hard with a snarl. Mercer cursed under his breath and lunged toward a side exit, but Elias caught him by the collar and slammed him against the wall. Marina grabbed the fallen pistol and pointed it at Shaw, her hands trembling but steady enough to prevent him from rising. "You okay?" she breathed. "You shouldn't be here," Elias answered, though his voice softened with the guilt and relief tangled within it. "Too bad," she whispered. "I'm staying." Mercer sneered. "Touching." Elias hauled him upright. "You sold intelligence to the Soviets. You killed Brooks, and you tried to bury Candlefall." Mercer's expression froze. "You have no idea what Candlefall really is." "Then talk." Mercer's lips twitched. "Why speak when the archive speaks louder?" Shaw lunged suddenly, forcing Marina to fire a warning shot into the wall. Mercer used the distraction to wrench free and sprint down the corridor. Elias tried to chase, but the stone passage split in two directions. Mercer vanished into the left tunnel, swallowed by darkness. By the time Elias and Marina fought their way through the twisting path and emerged into the open night, Mercer and Shaw were gone. Only the wind remained, carrying with it the echo of 1983. Elias turned to Marina. Her breath fogged in the cold air. Her eyes held both fear and something softer, something he recognized but hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. She stepped closer. "Elias, whatever Candlefall is, we face it. Together?" His jaw relaxed for the first time in days. In a life carved from deception, Marina felt like a truth he could trust. "Together," he said. The church bells above rang faintly, as if Father Leonard himself approved. The wind howled through the broken arches of Saint-Michel-de-Roche as dawn crept over the Ardennes, casting pale gold over the snow-dusted stones. Inside the hidden corridors beneath the church, Elias Ward and Marina Hale moved cautiously, the cold squeezing their breath into thin, white ribbons. The night's battle had left scratches on Elias's cheek, dust in his dark hair, and tension in every muscle. Marina, though steady, carried the tremor of adrenaline in her fingers, her auburn hair mussed by the chase. Yet both walked with purpose. Grant Mercer was still inside these tunnels. and the 13th archive had not yet been secured. The air in the deepest chamber was tight with the metallic sting of fear. Mercer's boots echoed somewhere ahead, a rhythmic challenge. Elias and Marina navigated the twisting stone corridors until a faint glow shimmered from within the central vault, the heart of Leonard's hidden world. Mercer stood there, lantern raised, his silhouette tall and rigid. The shimmering dust illuminated the scar on his cheek, sharpening his predatory expression. "You just don't know when to stay dead?" he said quietly. Elias stepped forward. "You sold our assets. You betrayed your own. Leonard tried to expose you." Mercer smirked. "Everyone betrayed someone in those days." Before Elias could reply, two more figures emerged from the shadows, hired operatives, both armed. The first, Derek Vaughn, was a broad-chested man in his early 40s, with dark, wavy hair, a trimmed beard, and a gaze dulled by years of mercenary work. His nose was crooked from old breaks, his demeanor efficient but cold, the kind of man who followed orders without caring whom they harmed. The second, Maeve Corbin, was a thin, sharp-faced woman of about 30, clad in a gray tactical jacket. Her short black hair framed piercing eyes that always seemed to judge weakness. Maeve moved with a feline confidence, shaped by a childhood spent in foster homes where she learned quickly that survival depended on reading danger before it arrived. She spoke little, but every motion conveyed an intelligence sharpened by hardship. Elias's jaw tensed. 3 against 2. The odds were miserable unless he found what he suspected Leonard had left behind. Marina placed a hand discreetly on a loose stone near the base of the wall. Earlier she had noticed faint tool marks there, evidence of recent disturbance. Elias nodded subtly. Mercer raised his weapon. "Hand me the archive key." "No," Elias said simply. Mercer pulled the trigger. The shot cracked through the chamber, but Elias dove behind a stone slab at the last instant. Marina yanked the marked stone from the wall and stumbled backward as the entire panel shifted open. A narrow passage appeared, steep and dusty, angled downward. Mercer shouted, "Don't let them escape!" Vaughn fired wildly. Maeve lunged forward. Elias grabbed Marina's wrist and pulled her into the dark. "Shoot!" And the wall slammed shut behind them as if Leonard himself had triggered it. The chute dropped steeply, forcing them to slide through decades of forgotten dust. They hit the ground hard, but safe. Marina coughed. "What is this place?" Elias lifted the lantern they had carried. Its dim glow revealed carved crosses etched into the tunnel walls. "Leonard's escape route," Elias murmured. "A last sanctuary." They followed the tunnel until a faint glow appeared. Moments later, they emerged behind the church, into the snow-covered cemetery. Marble headstones stood like sleeping sentinels. Birds perched on angel statues. The air tasted of frost and freedom. Marina looked back at the opening, cleverly hidden between 2 tall gravestones. "He called it a path for the faithful," she whispered, remembering Leonard's tape. Elias nodded. A way out, and a way to protect the truth. They climbed the hill as morning light broke over the treetops. For the first time, the world felt open again. Minutes later, they reached their parked car, retrieved the archive, and sped toward Brussels. The American embassy, housed in a stone building guarded by tall iron gates, received them under tight security. A senior official, Deputy Ambassador Thomas Reeve, a dignified man in his late 50s with silver hair and fatherly blue eyes, met them. Reeve had a calm, diplomatic air, someone shaped by decades of smoothing crises before they could ignite. He listened carefully as Elias and Marina explained everything. His expression darkened. "If what you're saying is true, Mercer won't leave Belgium alive, not with these charges." By noon, European intelligence and American authorities launched a coordinated operation. Mercer and his operatives were intercepted on a rural road leading toward the German border. Vaughn surrendered. Maeve attempted to flee but was captured. Mercer, cornered at last, made one final attempt to fire on the officers before being disarmed and arrested. Hours later, Elias stood inside a secure embassy room as agency representatives from Langley joined via encrypted call. His former superior, Assistant Director Rhodes, the man who had warned Marina earlier, looked unusually relieved. "Agent Ward, you were right. Candle Falls files were corrupted. A review board is reopening the entire case." His tone shifted, almost gentle. "You're cleared, fully restored." Marina stood nearby, her hands clasped tightly. Elias exhaled slowly, the breath of a man who had spent months underwater and finally surfaced. "What about Father Leonard?" Marina asked. Rhodes hesitated, then spoke. "We owe that man more than we can ever repay. His record will be corrected, his service acknowledged. Officially, he died protecting classified information vital to national security." Elias closed his eyes briefly, a silent salute to the priest who had guarded truth for 40 years. Later, as afternoon snow drifted over the Ardennes, Elias returned to the church. He stood beneath the ancient vaulted roof, dressed again in his black suit and silver tie. Light streamed through the stained glass windows, illuminating the dust like golden embers. Marina stepped beside him, wearing a warm charcoal coat and a soft wool scarf. "You okay?" she asked. "For the first time in a long time," he said softly. Through the broken archway, the sun painted a gentle glow over the old stone floors. Marina touched his arm. "Wherever you go next, you won't go alone." Elias turned to her. Her green eyes held strength, warmth, and the quiet promise of new beginnings. A smile ghosted across his lips, small but real. Outside, the kestrel from the tower circled overhead, letting out a single cry that echoed through the morning, as if blessing the moment. And beneath the ancient roof, in a church that had held its breath for decades, the last shadows of 1983 finally lifted.